Hi, I'm Wendy, and I'm going to show you how to breed your very own superworms. Now, the superworms that you buy at your pet store are actually the larval form of a type of darkling beetle, specifically Zaphobus moreo, and they originate in Central and South America, and they're relatively easy to breed on your own at home. Now, before you get started, you're going to need some basic supplies. The first thing that you're going to need is something to house your beetles and your worms in. Now, this here is a Sterilite drawer system, and I like these because they save space and they're cheap, and you can get these online or at any chain store. The next thing you're going to need is some wheat bran. Now, this is the bedding for the worms, and they actually eat it as well, and the beetles eat it also. And you can buy this online, bulk, which really is the best place to buy it at your local grocery store. It's going to be a bit expensive, and it doesn't have to be organic. As long as it's wheat bran, it's perfectly fine, and it's safe to use. Now, the second thing you're going to need is some water crystals. And you don't need to purchase the pre-made water crystals at the pet store. They're overpriced, honestly, and you can do the same thing yourself for a little of nothing. And what you do is you go to any garden center. You can go online. That's where I buy mine. And anything that's made to keep soil moist. So this is what I have right now. And these are soil moist granules. And I think this bag costs $10, and this is going to last for a very long time. Now, to make your water crystals, you are going to need some dechlorinated water. And you don't need to go buy special water. You just take a jug like this, and you're just going to fill it with tap water. And you're going to let it sit with the lid off for 48 hours. And after that, it is perfectly safe to use. And you are going to take a jug like this, and you're going to go ahead and fill it with water. You're going to add your granules, and you'll end up with something like this. And you can go ahead and just put a lid on this, keep it airtight, and you don't need to refrigerate it. This will be good for weeks, even a couple months. The next thing that you're going to need is egg crate. And egg crate is relatively inexpensive. It's usually best to buy bulk online, especially if you're going to be breeding a lot. Buying smaller amounts is fine, but it can get costly if you're going through a lot of this. Before you get started, it is important to understand the 4 life stages of a darkling beetle. First, there is the egg, which hatches into the larva, which is the superworm here that we feed our reptiles. Now, after about 10 weeks, the larva will begin the process of metamorphosis. At this point, he is completely helpless. That is why it's very important to take your individual worm and put him in a container like this by himself so that the other worms cannot eat him. Now, after about 2 weeks, the larva will turn in to the pupa, which we have here. Now, after about 3 weeks, from the pupa will emerge the adult darkling beetle, which is what you will be breeding. All right, to get started, you want to go ahead and take one of your tubs and fill it with about a ½ inch to an inch with your wheat bran. And you want to go ahead and take your superworms and put them in there like so. Then you want to go ahead and also add a piece of egg crate. Now, this gives them something to climb on and a way for them to spread out and separate from one another, because if they're kind of in a cluster, they will begin to eat one another. You also want to go ahead and feed your superworms. I prefer to feed a variety of vegetables consisting of leafy greens. So I have some kale here, some fruit, I have a piece of an apple, and then some potatoes. Now it's important that they stay hydrated, because if they're not hydrated, they will eat one another for hydration. So you want to make sure you've got plenty of vegetables in there for them to drink from, but you also want to check periodically to make sure that nothing is molding. And if it is, you go ahead and take that out and throw it in the trash. Now the adult beetles eat the same thing as the larvae, but you want to also give them water crystals. And that is because it is more important to keep them well hydrated, because they will eat their own eggs and their own larvae, and you're not going to get any superworms. So they also get a piece of egg crate, and this just gives them room, once again, to separate from one another, and so that they're not stressed and eating one another. After you've placed your beetles in their own container, it'll take about 3 weeks to a month or so for them to lay eggs and for those eggs to hatch. Now, in order to check for larvae, you're going to take about a handful of your bran, and you're just going to kind of thumb through it and watch very closely to see if there's any larvae in there, and they'll be very, very small. So you'll have to go through and look, and once you do see the little worms moving, you are going to want to remove your beetles and put them in a separate bin by themselves so they don't eat their offspring. At this point, you feed your larvae, they get larger, and then you're going to have the size of superworms that you need in order to feed your reptiles. Over time, you will need to change the bran that's in with the larva. You'll notice when it's time to change your bran because it'll begin to smell. At that point, you go ahead and take your worms out, put them in a new bin, throw away the old bran, and just wash with mild detergent and rinse well with water. If you have any questions, you can message me on Facebook at facebook.com/chromatic geckos. Thank you for watching, and good luck with your superworm breeding.